Hi, I'm Jonathan from Boredom Sated.
And I'm Boris from Boredom Sated.
Today we are going to continue our creature comparison concept that we've talked about from between 5th edition and Pathfinder 2. And what are we going to talk about today?
We're going to talk about dragons, but not just all the dragons. We're going to pick a specific one, and we're going to go with the red, the most popular villain in all fantasy.
Yeah, the red dragon is generally famous because if you think about most fantasy stories, what is the dragon color that you see, what you think of? It's a big, angry red dragon. Lord of the Rings, it's a red dragon. I mean, in general, with most fantasy, you generally think, bright red dragon breathes fire. In
Yep.
D&D, a lot of the different dragons do different things, have different breath weapons, so we wanted to go with the single most consistent dragon, and we obviously wanted to go with the evil one because it's like, oh, we're going to compare the good dragons, because everyone knows about good dragons when you think of, again, we're going with the idea of
Right.
big, angry, tyrant, horrible, mean. So it's got to be red.
Yes. The ones that parties set up, go adventure so they can be better, so they can slay in the end.
Yeah, I mean, you don't go say, I'm going to now go off into the swamp and kill that black dragon.
Yes.
Yeah, it's, I mean,
It's not the same.
it's not the same.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about the red dragon. We're going to talk about some of the differences between the Pathfinder version and the 5th edition version. Now, obviously, dragons have a rich concept in history. Dragons have been talked about in ancient times by the Greeks, by the Chinese, in India, in the Americas. Literally everywhere has their dragon stories. They don't always look the same. They don't always have the same abilities, but in most cases, they are large flying reptilian creatures of intelligence, and they often have a lot of stories that go along with them. Sometimes they're wise, sometimes they're evil, sometimes the hero has to go slay them, sometimes someone has to go talk to them. All sorts of different types of history. In more recent history, obviously, we usually think of the dragon as the big angry overlord.
Yes. So, the two different sets of dragons in Pathfinders and D&D are um, overall, I think, very similar. One of the biggest difference, and you can describe this, Jonathan, is that there's four age groups in Dungeons and Dragons, and there's only three age groups in Pathfinder.
Right. So we'll start by talking about the 5th edition dragons. 5th edition dragons are 5th edition red dragons come in four general categories. You've got the wormling, so it's a baby dragon. The wormlings for all the CRs come between CR 1 and 4, I believe. The red dragon wormling is a CR 4. The young dragons come usually between about 7 and 10. Again, the red is on the high end, so CR of the young dragon is CR 10. The adult dragons run from, I think, about 12 to 17, and the red, again, is a CR 17. And then you've got the ancient, the thing that you think of when you think of the big boss that you've got to fight at the end of a Dungeons & Dragons campaign. And the that one is a CR 24. Just to remind you, the max level for players is 20. So this is a CR 24.
Yes. Whereas in the Pathfinder, they didn't have the wormlings. They started with young, and then adult and ancient. And the dragons range from around 8 to 11, with the young red being the second highest at 10. The adults run from around 12 to 15. Again, the adults are red is the second highest at the 14, and the ancients run from around 17 to 20, with the ancient red being a creature 19th level.
So we're not going to go over the AC, the damage they do, things like that, because, again, it's hard to compare, especially at very high level, between the damage done by a creature in Pathfinder and a creature done in 5th edition. What we will say...
I would, though, say that they are very similar to the CR that they are and the party that they would be facing. So the challenge equivalent to each game is equal.
Yeah, the challenge equipment is pretty good.
Yeah.
Because of the way ACs work in 5th edition, a lower level party could probably fight a not the ancient, but against any of the others. They could probably fight it a little earlier.
Right.
But that's a thing that specifically is one of the things that makes 5th edition so versatile, is the fact that a lot of these creatures you can fight at multiple levels, because power level is kind of it depends on how you want to play it. The big thing,
Right.
the big difference between the Red Dragon in Pathfinder and the Red Dragon in 5th edition is, Boris will talk about the main bonus that you get from being Pathfinder. The main bonus you get from being a Red Dragon in 5th edition is your lair. Lair actions are fantastic. Magma erupts from a point on the ground once a round, or a tremor shakes the lair, making it so that people have to make a DC Dex save or be knocked prone. Volcanic gases. Red dragons hang out in volcanoes. Red dragons hang out in places that are very, very hot and very uncomfortable. And they have specific rules for what the dragon's lair gets in addition to their normal rules. And obviously, once you get to the adult and the ancient dragon, they are legendary creatures, so they have legendary resistances and they have legendary actions.
Yep.
Now, all dragons, at least in 5th edition, definitely have a Frightful Presence. That's a common, I believe, between both games. The Frightful
Yep.
Presence is a very high DC Wisdom save for the way this works, and just like otherwise, in both games they have nice big fire cones. The Ancient Red Dragon, as an example, in 5th edition, has a 26d6 fire cone, whereas Pathfinder one is a measly 20d6.
20d6 with a DC of 42 reflex.
Yeah, but DC 42 and DC 24
It's not
dexterity, it's not comparable.
No. I meant that it is in line with the game, which is probably 22 is in line with D&D what 42 would be.
Yeah, no, the DC for 24 for DC for a reflex save for a dexterity saving throw in 5th edition is very high, but that's because this is a CR 24 monster and needs to be that high.
Yep.
Overall, it is a nice big boss. It does some neat things, but there's nothing super special about the dragon in 5th edition.
Right. So whereas the Pathfinder decided to make the dragon a little bit even more nastier, in that they are not just fighter types with high 2 hits and high armor class and all of these damage dealing attacks and multiple attacks and frenzied, but they are also spellcasters. So a ancient red dragon is a 9th level spellcaster, as well as just a devastating fighting machine.
And when he says 9th level spellcaster, he means can cast 9th level spells, which is a big difference.
Yes. And the role-playing aspect that Pathfinder also gave, and yes, you can always change the rules and do the same in D&D 5th edition, is that all dragons can change into humans. So you could really make one of these dragons a really good ongoing villain that can change into a human and interfere in the party's goals and everything, which is really interesting. Or you could, have them give adventures and have them come in, and because he needs an artifact and he can't get it, and get the party to go and get it for him. So there's a lot of that potential within the Pathfinder. The devastating things that the Red Dragon does is Draconic Momentum, in that if it crits, it recharges its breath weapon. So he can instantly, right after it crit, the next turn, he can breathe again, which is devastating.
Yeah, whereas the recharge for the breath weapon in 5th edition is the standard recharge. It recharges on a 5/6 if you roll that each turn, which is still very powerful. It's just different ways to play it. Overall, we both agree that both versions of the dragon are good. It depends on really what you want to do with it. The lair actions are something that they didn't do in Pathfinder, whereas making the dragon a spellcaster is something obviously they didn't do in 5th edition. A mix of the two rules would honestly probably be the way to go, but that might even make the dragon too powerful.
Yes, I agree. Giving it lair and spellcasting ability is probably going to be over the top. But I totally agree. There's no one is dragon is better than the other based on D&D or Pathfinder, and they're both in line with what you would expect in an adventure at the appropriate CR.
Yeah, so obviously you don't want to come here and be here. It's the same. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So it does matter. It's based on your personal preference. We just personally believe that both of them work very well, and both companies went with a different approach. But overall, both approaches are very good.
Yes, I totally agree. There's pretty much in my mind, there's no difference.
Well, that's fair. Anyway, you guys tell us what your thoughts are. Have you faced any dragons in D&D? I've fought a lot of 5th edition dragons. I have not fought a lot of Pathfinder dragons, and I'd like to keep it that way for at least a little while longer because they're dangerous. So tell us your stories, tell us your opinion, let us know in the comments, like, subscribe.
And I'm Boris from Boredom Stated.
I'm Jonathan. Everybody have a good day. See you guys next time.
Yep.